Yeah, I just been putting them on YouTube. Okay, guys, just review Shang Zhao Qin Han Sui Tang Song. This is the entirety of Chinese history. Yuan Mi Qing Republic, Mao Dang Wu. Wu is the last leader of China before the current one, which I'm just drawing a blank on the name. Has a song, Shang Zhao Qin Han, Shang Zhao Qin Han, Sweet Tang Song, Sweet Tang Song, Yuan Mi Qing Republic, Yuan Mi Qing Republic, Mao Dang Wu. I recommend learning the song because getting those in order are massive for order. Chinese history, I would honestly say, is more interesting than most of the other histories. Definitely more interesting than American history. Sort of idea. Okay, I'm not going to go all the way through this, but basic idea. Mythical Shang Empire mostly has like remnants of turtle bones that was in a very small area, but it's looked to by Confucianism as the ideal emperor. And the mandate of heaven is heaven, God has basically declared them the leader. Confucianism is a system that I'm going to describe to you guys right now when we go through the Tang Empire, because you'll see the conflict between the Confucians and the Buddhists gets played out in full deal. Qin Empire is where you get the term China. Mostly I'm mentioning it because of the terracotta soldiers. Just get that they're developing, able to do big projects, able to do massive things. And that's when the Han Empire, this is when the Great Wall starts. Okay. And I'm going to put it this way. Everyone from here on out is building the Great Wall. They just keep expanding it to keep out the Huns or the Xiongnu, I think is how you spell it, which is going to come up in your chapter because essentially in this empire, these guys take over. Got it? Does that make sense to everyone? And so there's an interplay with the Chinese of them being able to take people groups and make them Chinese. Got it? Does that make sense? They'll take in a group of raiders, riders, and all of a sudden they'll make them Chinese by making them the mandate of heaven, but now you have to be Chinese, use Chinese language, all this sort of stuff, which to me is relatively fascinating. The Han Empire is basically in contemporary with the Roman Empire. They basically don't know each other exist, but if you remember in the Silk Road Chapel, there was that General Zhang that opened up the Silk Road, right? That guy is part of this empire that then is trying to connect with the rest of the world. And by the time you're heading here, you have an interaction of like, I don't know how to say it. They're going to have lots of interactions, particularly with the Middle East, right? And so they're close enough that they can start to engage some of the Muslim issues that are kind of going on. The Sui Empire is going to be mentioned in your books. And I'll erase this in a moment. This is just, I don't need to go through all these. We'll go through all these later. These are the Mongols. But this is basically what your chapter is about, these three empires. Okay. And so you got to get them in a row. The Tang are probably the most important and one of the most fascinating ones because they're kind of the golden age. Okay. Which is fascinating because these guys took over. Got it? So here's what's going to happen. So let's talk about the Sui and then the Tang. Okay, so as I'm drawing in closer here, you have the Warring States period, and then you have the Sui Empire, and then you have the Tang Empire. And the Warring States period, there you have basically just different areas of China fighting against each other. No one can decide who the emperor is. Okay, finally, someone unites them all, the Sui Empire. And then it's relatively short-lived. That's why I'm not focusing there, because really they're outside of the era, okay? And Sui Empire is just going to basically be the guys that are Chinese that kind of reunite the Chinese Empire. And then all of a sudden, just think this is along the coast. Basically, guys that are along the Silk Road, horse riders, are going to come in and they're going to take over China and then make themselves Chinese. And that's what the Tang Empire is. Now, how did the Tang Empire do that? I can't remember the first emperor's name. In fact, I can only remember the empress, and you'll see why in a moment. But the basic idea with the Tang is this. They're horse riders coming in, and they figured out that out in the enclaves of this China that we're, out in here is a little bit of, well, these are just representation of Buddhist monasteries. And the Buddhists are not liked by the Chinese. They're not liked by Confucians. Why? Because, well, they don't support, the Confucians don't like Buddhists. And if you look at their religions, you'll see why. Confucians are all about order, okay? And so think like Mulan's pressures here for a moment. It's like dad is on top, right? And then mom plays a different role that's going to be at home. And then the sons are going to be warriors in battle and going to have certain ones. And moms are going to be, and daughters are going to be balancing them out, but mostly working at home and doing things that look like what Mulan was supposed to be doing in that first scene when she, where she's getting all dressed up to be presented. Anyhow, here's the point. They believe that here is the social structure. The emperor is on top. And then I'll just go the nobles right here. One of the things that's funny about their social structure at the bottom or towards the bottom is merchants. They don't like traders. And then I'm going to note here is a special class that is very important to understand for Chinese history, which is the bureaucrat. Okay. Now, guys, what's a bureaucrat? Government official. Name a government bureaucrat. The word just even sounds bad. I'm going to note it just sounds like, do you want to be a bureaucrat when you grow up? Okay. It's like, do you want to work for the IRS? Do you want to work for physical, you know what I mean? Do you want to be a part of the treasury, or do you want to be a part of the diplomatic states? This is the things. Well, in their society, they believed that the next thing you could do, best thing to be than being born into nobility, being related to the emperor, for lack of a better term, was to become a bureaucrat. And how do you become a bureaucrat? Education. Who are you educated by? Confucian scholars. What do you learn? Confucian ideas, Confucian's books, Confucius everything, and then you can move up. Now, in watching Mulan, that like the actual bad guy, not Shang Li, with his hawk, not that guy, but the guy who's sitting around with the paper, like, writing down everything that they do wrong. That's the representative of the government bureaucrat. Got it? But in reality, what it is you're trying to be the right-hand man to the emperor, almost like, or to a general, or to something important. So to do this, they have these crazy education exams where they would sit for I think it's 3 weeks. And they're basically told you basically have to answer all the Confucian questions. And they only passed 10% of the people. And everyone else went home sad and educated. Okay, and this is important because now, throughout all the towns in China, you have this education system that's dominating, creating, and spreading the culture. Everyone kind of got the picture there? And so it's like when the Tang are coming from the outside and taking over using mostly horses, they're going to have to engage this whole education system and kind of use it. But they have to defeat it in war first, which they're not all that educated to do, the sort of idea. So what do? They enlist the competing religion. The competing religion is Buddhism, which you know a little bit about at this point. But let's just say it this way. Remember that the Buddha, right, leaves his position, leaves his family, leaves behind his princehood, and goes and sits under a tree and figures out the middle path. Everyone cool with this? The Confucians aren't. They're not cool with this. They don't like this. They're basically telling everybody, go do the trees, but go live in the trees. But when you have the Warring States period, right, there's no rule. So everyone's houses are getting destroyed and people are things. So life is suffering. And so as the economy tanks, the Buddhists start to increase. And what happens? Well, they start setting up monasteries, but they're still getting raiders. So they need to learn martial arts. Okay? So this is where karate came from. And, most of your karate movies that I'm sure you all have watched, all the Bruce Lee movies. There's all Kung Fu Panda. Okay. Right. It's there's a monastery out in the middle of nowhere where guys are training to fight trees. Well, that came from these guys trying to defend themselves against outside invaders, even though they're Buddhist monks. And yes, they had women, the whole nine. It's fighting sort of idea. So what does the Tang do? Hey, cool martial art ninja guys, let's go make a combined warrior of horses and ninjas, and let's go take on this dumb Confucian army that's just at this point, they would be like spearmen, right? And basically they win. And then they take over. And then they do something that's super shady for a Chinese, because this is like how the order's been. The Tang come on top, and they become the first Buddhist empire. Okay. Everyone got it here? And so when you guys are looking at it, when you guys are looking at it here, I'm just flat out saying it, that you guys are this is going to be like a bad deal, because now you have a whole set of bureaucrats, people spread throughout the Chinese idea, and they're going to do that. However, with the Tang Empire, the economy booms. Why? These guys, the leaders of it, are on the Silk Road. And remember, I told you that Chang'an is their center capital. They're going to actually move the capital from coastal China to more inland. Why? So there's trade along the Silk Road. And it's called the Silk Road. Why? Well, the Tang Empire realized that you can market silk to go along the Silk Road, and you can sell it all the way to Constantinople. Everyone got it there? And so this is going to create money. This is going to create exchange. And now everyone's kind of working together, and they're starting to put together. Remember, these guys, when you deal with Buddhism in China, it's all the Mahayana kind. That's when you associate it with statues. So if you're to do the oldest type of Buddhism, Theravada, it has no statues. It's just monks living in things. But Mahayana, which just means for the masses, is going to have the little Buddha statues that you guys tend to see. They're going to teach you how to meditate. And so those start getting exchanged along the Silk Road as well. And then they're starting to run into the Muslims, who are going to reject the Buddhism, but going to trade for the silk. And all of a sudden, there's a whole set of kind of flourishing that's going on here for about 100 years. I think it's in the 650 to 750 AD. And everything's going really well. And then they run into a succession issue. That is, the emperor doesn't have a son. And he does something super shady and basically hands his entire kingdom off to a woman. And so this is Empress Wu. Okay? You're dealing with Empress Wu. The basic idea is you are dealing with someone that gets in history because the Confucians don't like her. Are Chinese Confucians going to want a woman leading them? So basically, the Confucians are going to, we don't really know how great of an empress she was, because the Confucians are the one that wrote about her, and basically to them, she's a witch, and she's evil, and she's following the infidel Buddhists. So there's nothing good that's said about her in history. When you hit this test, I think I have a great Empress Wu quote, but it's basically this idea. On the one hand, China is progressive. Is that the right word? Or maybe it looks more like Europe, where it's like, hey, we put a woman into power, but because there's such a pressure to get China back to China, she's basically just taken to task and fought with. And she only rules for about 10 years. And number one, she does large Buddhist projects. So she takes a bunch of money and starts spending it on Buddhist things. Got it? And there's a statue, I think, that's 70 feet high that is built from this era. That is a Buddhist out in the forest, but there's a more famous one where she hired like, think the terracotta soldiers, but they cut out all the figures of Buddhas inside of a cave. And I think that's another one that I can't forget if it comes in a DBQ document, or if it comes in or it comes on your test or whatever. But it's like, you have to think this gal spent and expanded Buddhism. Well, the Confucians are going to hate that, right? And then at the same time, the economy is starting to lessen, and it's worldwide, because we're starting to hit like 750, and the bosses aren't quite in their full power, and the Mamelukes are starting to move, and there's some issues going on. And anyhow, she's gonna deal with this economy sort of falling, and then it's going to lead to disaster in the Tang Empire. Now, it's not during her era, but her grandson is going to be involved in, I think it's I'm not going to write it down, the Lai Shun Civil War, which is, when I said the Tang is like the most romantic, I literally did mean it's like a love story. Okay, so it's going to lead to a civil war. And what happens in the civil war is this. There's an emperor. He has multiple empresses, right? Emperor. He has multiple multiple empresses. One of them falls in love with a general. Okay, everyone got it here? I don't even know you really need to write this down. It's just a fun story. Okay, the general, right, is now being accused of having an affair with the empress, right? And that, of course, means he needs to be killed. The general responds by mobilizing troops. And now the Buddhist, he's basically able to get all the Confucians to back him. And the Buddhists have been a little bit lazy in their martial art training, and they're not ready to support on the things that are going on. Okay? And then the basic idea is this. When you guys are looking at it, you're dealing with the Confucian troops that are engaging there. They're basically destroying the Tang Empire's armies. Got it? And so you have this whole thing. Is the general going to win back the queen? Is the queen going to go with the general? Is she going to stay with the emperor? It's like all drawing out. And he gets right to Chang'an, and they're about ready to fight. And then, like just in classical thing, he ends up dying of a massive heart attack or poisoned or whatever. The fates just didn't allow it, whatever it may be. Everyone got the picture there? Got it? And everyone goes, wow, the Tang Empire still has the mandate of heaven, however weak it is. But then he still has this massive army, and the Tang Empire needs to win them over. So what do? They basically go, hey, Confucian army, come join us. Sure. What do you want us to do? Get rid of the Buddhists. And so this army that this general has formed to fight this war of love, quote unquote, got it. This is all like, propaganda. If you guys haven't learned what does propaganda mean, guys? Yeah, like it's advertising so that you guys will support other things that are going on. So the getting rid of the Buddhist empire becomes what they ultimately start to be. And for the next 100 years, the Tang Empire sends its army to slowly get rid of whatever Buddhist influences that have been corrupting the country that could lead to something like Emperor Swu. Got it? Everyone got the picture there? They don't like that the Tang had a woman, so then the Tang Empire betrays the Buddhist roots that it had and basically takes on the Confucian identity, right? And then starts to eliminate all the Buddhists. Everyone kind of got it there? So the Tang Empire on the one hand is like the best empire for the Buddhists and also the worst empire for the Buddhists. Everyone got it? Because as this is going on for 200 years, it's then there. And then from here, it's a 100-year slow decline before the Tang are finally eliminated. After the Tang are eliminated, they're basically taken over by the Song Empire. Okay? I think it said Song in, if you're actually saying it in Chinese, but since it's spelled Song, we can go there. Now, what happened with the Song Empire is they had a relatively same, China at the time is basically looks something like this along its coast. Okay? And this is where the Chang'an is. And it doesn't have the full idea yet. And what happens is very quickly they lose a civil war to the Jurchen. I don't even think you guys need that name. And they become known as the Southern Song Dynasty. Okay? and it's relatively small in terms of its land mass and peoples. However, it sits there and develops technology. So, and this is going to go from 1,000 to 1,200. Got it? Before they're going to be taken over by the Mongols. Okay. So it's kind of setting the stage right here. Jurchen are one of the first people groups taken over by the Mongols. These guys don't get taken over until about 50 years later because everyone knows that they have a lot of technological power and prowess. So the Song Empire is the tech empire. Okay. And at the time, they're looking at some of those valuable. Now, let's talk about Chinese. This is general Chinese tech that they had. Chinese tech. Number one, salt. General Chinese tech and products. Salt. They have everything salt is coming from China. Just think of your sweet, what do you call it? Your soy sauces. They're basically flavored salt juice, right? Really, yeah. And so when you're dealing with the salt, they've developed it. They've also kind of industrialized it. Now, that's a strong word to give it because industrial, you think all the mechanics and stuff. But basically, they're basically the best in the world at extracting salt from the ground. And they're doing it in mass and in massive form. We're used to industrialized salt, which means that every single salt thing looks exactly the same. You have to remember that NaCl, you can also bromine, CML, all this sort of mixture. You'd have different tasting salts in different parts of the world. I read an entire book on salt. I know that sounds boring, but it really wasn't. And there's like a whole tide of history. And then they monopolized it, and then they used it as taxes. And so they have one of the things in this world, you got to remember, you're the salt of the earth, Jesus says. Salt is like of extreme value at this point. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt when they couldn't get enough silver or denarius because it's a medicine. It dries your food, which is probably its most important function. Number two, it's flavoring, like you guys know. And then it was used. It's used almost in every single form of cooking that they possibly could have. And there are only a few places in the world that could extract it easily. That is, anyone sit with a pan at the ocean and do it. But the Chinese have mass taken it out of the ground. And that's what they're so famous for. Number two, paper. Okay, the bamboo paper method was way better than what was being done elsewhere. And they're the ones that perfected paper and thus perfected writing. And what ultimately happens is that gets exchanged to the Middle East, and then the Middle East to Europe. So this is all happening around the time of the Crusades. The Tang Empire ends up with a war with the Abbasid Empire, and it was a short war that didn't really accomplish much. But the Muslims end up with a bunch of new paper techniques and new ways of drawing and writing. Silk, obviously, and then, of course, porcelain. Okay. And then I'm going to note here, they are known for their big tech. Think big building projects, the Great Wall. Okay. So what's dealing with in the Song Empire? Number one, tech developments is the Grand Canal. And they're going to basically make a canal from the Yangtze to the Yellow River. Okay. And then they're going to make they have astrolabes. What am I forgetting here? Then they're going to perfect the bamboo boat called the junk. Okay. Now, dhows, relatively small. If you guys have seen the live action Aladdin, that is a picture of how I picture a dhow, where like Will Smith is, floating off on a boat at the end. You guys remember? That's a dhow. A junk is massive. It's a cruise liner, and it can carry tons and tons of stuff. Okay. So yes, the boat is called the junk, and there's a bunch of junk in the junk. Anyhow, you get the okay. Yeah, I even think that might be where we got the term. Everyone got the picture? And then number three, what was they doing after that? So that big boat, it's going to be like, think massive sails. It's going to be bamboo everywhere, and that's going to be like the most important thing that the Chinese make, because they're going to jump into the Indian Ocean trade and start trading with everybody. And that's where, if you guys remember, I did on the summer videos, Zhang He in the Ming Empire, he's going to go boat all the way to Africa. Does everyone got the picture? And this is all before Columbus. Got it? And then Columbus's caravel, the ship, is tiny compared to a junk, but it moves way faster and carries cannons. Anyhow, which comes to the other tech that I should mention is gunpowder. It's in this era. It's not just in the Song Empire, but the Chinese are the ones that come up with fireworks and gunpowder, I think, as you know from the things that are going on there. And then I'm forgetting something major here. I know that I am. Anyhow, the Song Empire is the tech empire. And so if I just even give you those four, those are all major game players as the exchanges are going to happen in the Middle East, mostly because the Mongols take them all over and then fight a bunch of wars. Got it? But right now, they're all being held there, so no one wants to invade the location with gunpowder. On the negative is social structure. So they hate Empress Wu, right? So they're going to be anti-Buddhist, right? For sure. They're going to be strong on this education towards the bureaucrat. That's what you want to be, bureaucrat. And then women are going to take a dive in especially noble society, and it's depicted by foot binding. Okay. What they're desiring is a woman that has petite, nice silk shoes on. And so what they do is when they're little kids, they basically put them in some sort of wooden thing so their feet won't grow. And the foot binding, you guys can look at it on the internet, is going to be gross and painful more than gross by the standards. But it shows that the women aren't supposed to be working. The women aren't supposed to be leading. The women aren't supposed to be, especially the noble women, they're not supposed to be doing any of these things. So to be a peasant woman, it's relatively feudalistic, the society. To be a peasant woman, you're going to have to work and you're not going to foot bind. But any of the noble women or women trying to enter into the high class or women trying to marry a bureaucrat, they're all going to go through this process of making sure their feet are as small as possible, so they can do as little work as possible, so that they basically, women take a dive in terms of social class. And that is, I'll say, even is driving kind of like, think the Mulan myth, right? Where there's going to be a woman that saves us, and she's going to save you by, if you read the actual myth, it's by character, it's not by actual warring or something. Or whatever. What was she supposed to find in the live action one? Chi or something. Anyhow, it's things that are going on there. Okay? I kind of got the picture. One last thing I'm going to mention, just because I probably should have mentioned it earlier. There is one other religion rolling out there. Well, two others, but one of them is very brief to say about. So just when you think of China as like the land of religions, coming from China is Confucianism, which isn't really a religion. They'll say that it's like a philosophy, and Buddhism gets described this way. Then you have Buddhism being inserted in. They have two other religions that they generally follow. Number one is ancestor worship. And I don't feel like I need to say much about that, because that is depicted very well in Mulan. There you go. And finally, you have Taoism. It can be spelled with a T too. Taoism. And basically, this is the idea that there's a balance. Okay, and it works pretty well with Confucianism, because it's going to say there's a sun and there's a moon, and those two things need to be held in balance. You're going to have a day, you're going to have a night, and then it's going to go, not one is better than the other, they're just different, and they are different forms of how balance should be held. And then they do it with male and female, and they hold it in balance. So when you think about, like, it has a lot of modern, like, architectural things. And just when you start thinking balance, you think balance of the force. It's like nature has this balance in it. And it has this symbol that's relatively famous where it's like you got, let's see if I can even draw it here even somewhat. You got like a dark black, and then it's got like a circle in the middle that's light, and then you'll have a light side that's got a black circle in the middle of it. You guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, and so it's going for this idea of like being in balance with nature and male and female and all these things are going to lead to a society. And those things can come up like when you're doing like, say, analysis of documents, you're getting it for your multiple choice questions, you're getting it for anything, any sort of prompt. You got to be able to recognize between those 2, 3, 4 religions. Got it? Does that make sense? And always with China, it's kind of a mess on that. They're religious syncretists, so just throw them around. Like you can just like be a little bit of Buddhist over here with a little bit of Taoism. You could see how those two would kind of work together, or Confucianism and Taoism. These two, however, by and large end up opposed because these guys want you to leave your family and go meditate, for lack of a better term. And these guys want this like very strong emperor-led social structure. Got it? And so they're going to go, that's going to be a big part of it. And then on top of this all is the mandate, right? And so ultimately they believe in a sky god and the mandate of heaven. And the mandate of heaven is basically I'm the emperor because God told me I am, because I'm more moral than you, creating a better economic system than you. Yep. I would say that they're coming up with it on their own in terms of that. I would say something similar happens with, say, something like the Egyptian myth. But like, okay, when I go like Old Testament, because you said the Torah, Moses has an interaction with God. He doesn't get props for being moral. Does that make sense? He didn't work his way to the top. He was a shepherd, and all of a sudden God said, go deliver my people. It's relatively random, right? Is how I believe the Bible is even trying to get you to feel. Abraham is picked. Why? He couldn't even have kids, right? It's like he's picked because he's weak. This is mandate of heaven would be the opposite. I'm the most moral. I can raise the biggest army. I can make the best economy. They have to have like proven themselves. I always find it funny because one of the Han Empire, okay, which is the longest one. It has the most famous emperor. His name is Emperor Wu. His empire started, and he's the son. His dad is a prison guard. But the Zhailong, it's basically just the Qin Empire, the one that made all the terracotta soldiers. It's only 2 people long, but they both ruled for a very long time. And they're trying to hold it by putting everyone in prison. So they have an army, right, that they fight against, and they win, and then they throw all the soldiers in prison. And so then the prison guard is sitting there looking at all these warriors in his prison, and they're like, guys, we want to start a rebellion. And he could see that the Zhailong's son is super weak. And they're like, sure. And so he unlocks the doors and basically receives the mandate of heaven by defeating in this like sort of idea. So he goes from prison guard to emperor almost overnight, and everyone's cool with it because he can go, look, I'm the moral one. He was throwing all the Chinese people in prison. I'm the one that's able to give freedom to China and deliver people. You can get like, morals are loose here, right? It's like sort of idea, but that's how they're kind of functioning in that mandate. So the mandate is passed from the Zhailong family to the Han family. Emperor Wu, you'll run into, and Emperor Wu is named after him, right? Emperor Wu is like he had like an 80-year reign, and he ruled for forever. He's their King David. He's their Ashoka. He's their king that everyone remembers. But he's during the Han Empire, and he just solidifies the Han Empire, so it rules for 400 years, which is one of the longest dynasties. All right, I'm going to stop the video because any other questions, guys?